She was named in Time magazine's list of 100 most influential people in the world.
A healthcare pioneer is being compared to visionaries like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. This morning, Elizabeth Holmes is part of the new Time 100 list just out. Her mission is to allow blood testing in every drugstore at a fraction of Medicare costs.
She was considered a role model, the female Steve Jobs, the one person who became the pinnacle of women entrepreneurs. She is a self-made female billionaire who turned out to be a big fraud. This is the story of Elizabeth Holmes, the billionaire who scammed investors for over $600 million. Again, it is a story of fame, lies, fraud, regret, and prison sentence. My name is Bernard, and you're watching African Dream Motivation. Let's begin. It was a beautiful day in 1984. The month was February and the day was on the 3rd. A beautiful lady was born in Washington, D.C. and was named Elizabeth Holmes. Her parents were renowned personalities in the United States. Her father was a vice president at Enron, an energy company that went bankrupt in 2001. Her mother was a congressional committee staffer. Their lineage proved that the Holmes family was one of the richest in America. Born into a rich family, Elizabeth pursued education and attended St. John's School in Houston, where she developed a great interest in computer programming. She later explained that she started her first business selling C++ compiler to Chinese universities. Her parents were very particular about her education and made sure she never lacked anything academically. In 2002, she attended Stanford University and studied chemical engineering. She performed marvelously well during her stay at the school. She came across a technology entrepreneur who became a huge part of her life. Ramesh Sani Bhawani, a Pakistani-born Hindu who immigrated to India and then the United States. The two met in Beijing when Elizabeth Holmes went on a trip as part of Stanford University's Mandarin program. She was just 18 by then and had just graduated from high school. Bhawani, on the other hand, was 19 years older than Holmes and was married to another woman, but his marriage came to an end abruptly. He divorced his wife in 2002 and then began a romantic relationship with Holmes in 2003. She later worked as a student researcher and laboratory assistant at the Stanford School of Engineering. She had a great future ahead of her, and outside the School of Engineering, she decided to explore more opportunities at the end of her freshman year. She worked in a laboratory at the Genome Institute of Singapore and tested for severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, popularly known as SARS, through the collection of blood samples with syringes. Working closely with blood samples, she developed so much interest in blood testing. She worked so hard that by 2003, she filed her first patent application, which was on a wearable drug delivery pack. Gradually, she was becoming a master of the art of blood sampling, and in about a year, she dropped out of Stanford School of Engineering and used her tuition fee to fund a consumer healthcare technology company. She had a great vision of doing the impossible and changing the world. With a great vision, the mission had already begun.
I was 9 years old when I wrote this, and it begins, "Dear Daddy, what I want out of life is to discover something new, something that mankind didn't know was possible. I also want to study about man and his ways. Life is really interesting. I love being with you. It's my most favorite thing in the whole world. Love, Elizabeth." I wanted to do something with my life that people thought was impossible before.
In 2003, Elizabeth Holmes founded the company Real-Time Kiosk in Palo Alto, California, to democratize healthcare. Explaining her motivation behind such a company, she described her fear of needles as motivation and sought to perform blood tests using only a small amount of blood. It was a great idea to hear, but whether it was practically possible Many of her colleagues professed beg to differ. Even her medicine professor, Phyllis Gardner, responded to her pitch of the business and said, "I don't think your idea is going to work," unquote. He explained that it was impossible for her to accurately achieve her goal. These criticisms and denials are not something new to the world of business. Many people have been written off in the past completely, but they were able to turn the table around and see their dreams come true. Therefore, she was definitely not giving up. She had her advisor and Dean of School of Engineering, Channing Robertson, backing her idea. Later that year, she named the company Theranos. A new chapter was opened, and the Dean at the School of Engineering, Channing Robertson, became the company's first board member and subsequently introduced Elizabeth Holmes to venture capitalists who were ready to pump millions of dollars into the business. While growing up, Elizabeth Holmes really admired tech genius and Apple founder Steve Jobs. She copied his style of public appearances, including presentation and dressing. She was always seen in Steve Jobs' iconic 2007 icy-mayak turtleneck look. During her public appearances, she spoke in a deep baritone voice, which many people widely criticized her as being fake. Her family, however, maintained that her voice was authentic. Her business idea was really catchy, and with Robertson introducing her to venture capitalists, funds began flowing like a stream of water. By positioning herself strategically to secure venture capital, Elizabeth Holmes was able to raise $6 million by December 2004. She was able to pitch her technology to the extent that it was perceived as a huge innovation which was about to change the world for the best. Many investors couldn't afford to miss the opportunity to be part of a great future. By the end of 2010, the company had raised more than $92 million in venture capital. The company began forming a strong and formidable team, which was key in raising status of the company and also building trust with new and potential investors. In July 2011, Holmes met the former Secretary of State, and by the time their 2-hour meeting was over, he joined the Theranos board of directors. Over the course of 3 years, she was able to form the most illustrious board in the United States corporate history. For almost a decade, she operated the company in such a way that it was totally out of public scrutiny. Her strategy and ability to operate the company in a stealth mode meant that it was void of press releases, and the company didn't even have a website until September 2013. Even with the creation of the website, it was because of a partnership with the second largest pharmacy store chain in the United States, Walgreens. While enjoying great success and expansion, she was commended by many people, especially in the medical industry. From 2013 forward, she received outstanding media attention, which was very significant in the quick growth of the company. But later, it became the premises of her demise. She was also praised by the editor-in-chief of Medscape, Eric Topol, who described her invention as a phenomenal rebooting of laboratory medicine. The media attention kept increasing in 2014 after she appeared on the covers of Fortune's, Forbes, the New York Times Style magazine, and many others. Forbes recognized Holmes as the world's youngest self-made female billionaire and ranked her in 110 on the Forbes 400 in 2014. Theranos was valued at $9 billion and has raised more than $400 million in venture capital. By the end of 2014, her name appeared on 18 US patents and 66 foreign patents. In 2015, Holmes established agreements with Cleveland Clinic, Capital Blue Cross, and AmeriHealth Caritas to use Theranos' technology. At this stage of her life and company, she had received many recognitions and endorsements, but one other thing the fame brought was the attention of medical purists who pay particular attention to deviances. While the general public was celebrating her success, these purists were looking through the thick veil of her success. In about a decade, Elizabeth Holmes had built an opaque and secretive company and successfully kept everything behind closed doors, but the moment she stepped into the limelight of fame, everything was about to change. While she was making appearances on front pages of major newspapers and publications, John Carreyrou of Wall Street Journal was secretly monitoring her company. John received a tip-off from a medical expert who was suspicious of Theranos' Edison blood testing device. He initiated a secret month-long investigation of Theranos, and this adventure became an unending uncovering of fraud and criminal offenses. When this investigation came to the notice of Holmes, she initiated a campaign through her lawyer, David Boyce, in an attempt to stop John from publishing his findings. She threatened him with legal consequences and also made financial threats against Wall Street Journal and other whistleblowers. Her lawyer, David, was a well-known high-class lawyer who rose to national prominence by leading the United States federal government in their successful prosecution of Microsoft some years back. So with a lawyer of such caliber, there was no fight she was afraid of. But despite all the threats, John and the Wall Street Journal proceeded in publishing the findings, detailing how the Edison device gave inaccurate results and revealing that the company had been using commercially available machines manufactured by other companies for most of its testing. This was a huge bombshell, exposing the renowned billionaire and her successful company in an unrepairable way. John Carreyrou continued to report on unscrupulous practices the company was into, and then how Elizabeth Holmes had defrauded investors and deceived the general public and medical industry. In 2018, John published a book entitled Bad Blood, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup, detailing his investigation of Theranos. Elizabeth Holmes publicly denied all the claims and accused the Wall Street Journal of publishing false and misleading information. She appeared on CNBC's Mad Money the same evening the article was published. Jim Cramer said, "The article was pretty brutal," to which Holmes responded, "This is what happens when you work to change things. First they think you are crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world." Unquote. She was able to fight the claims and still defend her company against any wrongdoing. In January 2016, another threatening news surfaced. This time, it was from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMC. The CMC sent a warning letter to Theranos after an inspection of its Newark, California laboratory uncovered irregularities with staff proficiency, procedures, and equipment. The regulators proposed a 2-year ban on Elizabeth Holmes from owning or operating a certified clinical laboratory after the company had not fixed problems in its California lab in March 2016. The issue came up when she was interviewed on the Today Show, and there, she said that she was devastated that they couldn't catch and fix these issues faster. She continued with assurance that the lab will be rebuilt with a new scientific and medical advisory board to put everything in place. By July, the irregularities were not fixed, and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services banned Elizabeth Holmes from owning, operating, or directing a blood testing service for a period of 2 years. She appealed the decision to a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services appeal board. No matter how hard she fought the allegations, it greatly affected her credibility, causing the departure of most of their partners, including Walgreens, which ended its relationship with Theranos and closed its in-store blood collection centers. As if that was not enough, the U.S. Food and Drugs Administration also ordered the company to cease the use of its capillary tube nanotainer device, which is one of its core inventions. The years after saw a series of lawsuits directed at Elizabeth Holmes and her company Theranos. In 2017, the state of Arizona filed a lawsuit against Theranos, alleging that the company has sold 1.5 million blood tests to Arizonans while concealing or misrepresenting important facts about those tests. This lawsuit was settled and an agreement was reached to refund the cost of the test to consumers and to pay $225,000 in civil fines and attorney fees for a total of $4.65 million. Other investigations continued by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation and 2 class action fraud lawsuits, of which she denied any wrongdoing. As the case progressed, many stakeholders lost confidence in Theranos and felt deceived. Many threatened to take legal actions against the company, but that would have quickly collapsed Theranos. On 16th May 2017, about 99% of the shareholders reached an agreement with the company to dismiss all current and potential litigations in exchange for shares of preferred stock. To satisfy this demand, Holmes released a portion of her equity to honor the agreement. In March 2018, the SEC charged Holmes and Theranos former director Ramesh Bhawani with fraud by taking more than $700 million from investors while advertising a false product. On March 14, 2018, Holmes settled an SEC lawsuit. The charge of fraud included the company's false claim that its technology was being used by the US Department of Defense in combat situations. The company also lied when it claimed to have a $100 million revenue stream in 2014. That year, the company only made $100,000. The terms of Holmes' settlement included surrendering voting control of Theranos, returning 18.9 million shares to the company, a ban on holding an officer or director position in a public company for 10 years, and a $500,000 fine. The company was speedily running towards an obvious collapse. Employees were laid off more frequently. In 2015, when the company was enjoying so much success, it had more than 800 employees, but by 2017, over 500 employees had been laid off. By 2018, the company was left with less than 30 employees, and this gave a clear evidence how fast the company was collapsing. On 5th September 2018, the company announced that it had begun the process of formally dissolving, with its remaining cash and assets to be distributed to its creditors. This was just the beginning of her woes, and the United States Attorney and some victims of the fraud had unfinished business with her. At this stage, the trial has become a United States federal crime fraud against Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of Theranos, and its former president and chief operations officer, Ramesh Bhawani. The case alleged that Holmes and Bhawani perpetrated multi-million-dollar wire fraud scheme against investors and patients. Each of these accused had their own jury trial, which none of them had it easy. On June 15, 2018, following an investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office for Northern District of California in San Francisco that lasted more than 2 years, a federal grand jury indicted Holmes and Ramesh Bhawani on 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Both pleaded not guilty. Prosecutor alleged that Holmes and Bhawani engaged in 2 criminal schemes, one to defraud investors and the other to defraud doctors and patients. After the indictment was issued, Holmes stepped down as CEO of Theranos but remained chair of the board. She continued finding any way possible for the court to drop all charges against her. At a point, she developed a defense strategy of blaming the media for the downfall of Theranos. But as the investigation proceeded, more counts of fraud charges were added. In May 2022, the prosecutor added 12 fraud charges concerning test results from a patient in Arizona. It was a back-and-forth trial with new evidence surfacing every now and then and prosecutors filing indictments. In September 2022, Bloomberg News reported that Holmes was exploring a mental disease defense for her criminal fraud trial when the judge overseeing the case ruled that government prosecutors would be allowed to examine her. In February 2021, federal government prosecutors accused Holmes and other executives of destroying evidence in Theranos' final days in business. Her attorney argued that the government was to blame for their failure to preserve critical evidence. The specific evidence in question concerned the company's history of internal testing, including the accuracy and failure rate of Theranos' blood testing system. This case saw a lot of delays, making the proceedings last longer than was expected. Even though the investigation started way back in 2018, several external factors hindered its progress. It can be clearly asserted that it was delayed for more than a year due to COVID-19 pandemic and Holmes' pregnancy. The case was prosecuted by the United States Attorney for the Northern District of California, with Holmes being defended by the white-collar crime litigation firm Williams & Colony. After the delay had taken a good time of the proceedings, it resumed on 31st August 2021. Dozens of witnesses showed up, including James Mattis, a retired United States Marine Corps 4-star general who served as the 26th United States Secretary of Defense from January 2017 to January 2019. Other prominent investors were discussed to draw a precise picture of the extent of fraud. Former employees who were suspicious were present to disclose their findings and testify to the allegations. Evidence were provided of Holmes' role in fake product demonstrations, falsified validation reports, misleading claims about contracts, and overstated financials. There were even audio and video evidence of Holmes making inflated or misleading claims about Theranos. There were false documents claiming that Pfizer and Sharing Plug had validated the company's blood testing technology. Holmes admitted to personally manipulating those documents. She took the stance to defend herself for 7 days, but this couldn't take her out of the bad omen that was yet to come. During these 7 days, she talked about a vision of a future at Theranos, saying that it was not a crime to be optimistic about the possibility of a technology that she herself was misled by her own expert staff. Holmes testified that she had been raped while she was a student at Stanford University and that she had sought solace from Bhawani in the aftermath of the incident. She also said that Bhawani sought control over her during their romantic relationship, which was still ongoing when the alleged criminal act took place, and at times berated and sexually abused her. But in the end, she confirmed that she was not forced to make the false statement to investors, business partners, and the company directors. At the end of the proceedings, prosecutors stood their grounds that, of all the possible ways she could have handled the company, she chose the dishonest path. On January 3, 2022, Holmes was found guilty of 4 counts of defrauding investors, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 1 conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Holmes waited on a sentence while remaining at liberty on $500,000 bail, secured with properties. She faced a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison and a fine of $250,000 plus restitution for each count of wire fraud and for each conspiracy count. On November 18, 2020, U.S. District Judge Edward Davila sentenced Holmes to 11 years 3 months in prison and ordered her to surrender by April 27, 2023. The sentence included a fine of $400 or $100 for each count of fraud and a 3-year supervised release after the prison term. She could get about 15% reduction in prison time with good behavior, which will put her sentence to 9.5 years with no possibility for parole. Before the expose and collapse of Theranos, Holmes received numerous awards and recognition from highly honorable organizations. In 2015, she was appointed a member of the Harvard Medical School Board of Fellows and was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. She received so many honors and recognitions all over the world. She was previously named Fortune's Business Person of the Year and had been listed in Fortune's 40 Under 40 feature. But in 2016, Fortune's named her in its article on the world's 19 most disappointing leaders. This is the story of how Elizabeth Holmes went from a genius to being sentenced to more than 11 years in prison. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. This has been Bernard and you've been watching African Dream Motivation. Kindly subscribe for more.